Welcome everyone, I'm Brian, and today we're going to talk a little bit about noses, and we're going to draw a few kind of quick noses just from a front, three-quarter, and side view to kind of figure out how they relate to the rest of the head. And as we do our head breakdown, exactly where they're going to go, and we'll just talk about some nose basics. If you haven't watched our last video, I'd recommend doing that first because that talks more about the anatomy of the nose. We're just going to jump right in. So here we go. As I mentioned, we're going to start with the big shape of the head. We're going to start with the cranial mass and then kind of figure out how to add the side planes of the head to it. You know, the sides of the head, which we kind of chop a little bit of the circle off and then add the jaw down below. Then we'll add a center line, should be next, but I think I put the hairline and then I'm like, oh yeah, center line, add it on there. And then we take that shape of the face between the hairline and the chin, and we're gonna break that space into even thirds. And what we'll end up with is the hairline and then the brow line, which is kind of where the eyebrows are gonna meet. And then the nose, which is the connection point of the nose, where it connects to the skull, and then the chin down at the bottom. You know, double check, make sure they're correct, and then we kind of separate out the side plane of the head from the front and start constructing our brow rhythm here. But again, I probably should have started with the glabella, but I'll add it on there in a second, which I think is coming right now. There we go. Should probably put that part first. But then kind of find a nice connection point and then just kind of close off the bottom of the eye sockets in a way that works with the brow bone up above and how it kind of connects back into the cheek. And then that bottom part is a little more arbitrary. And it's not exactly the bottom of the eye socket. It's more like maybe part of orbicularis oris dropping down below the eye socket. Okay, but again, so our nose now is going to fit right in this middle third. Probably put that part first. And so, of course, in the anatomy section, we talked about all the anatomy, just kind of the alar cartilage, the wing of the nostril, the opening of the nostril, the septum, the nasal bone back into the cheek, and then that bottom part we want to start with just real quick here. It's just a simple box type shape. The eye socket, just kind of find the width of the nose, the angle of the nose, below the eye socket. You just start with a simple box, surprisingly even. But again, I probably should have started. It's going to kind of sit like this. It's coming right now. Probably put that part first. Kind of find a nice connection point, and then just kind of cut over this way a little bit, over this way a little bit, back into the cheek, and then that bottom part is a little more arbitrary. And the eye socket is side planes of the nose dropping down below the eye socket. Surprisingly even. Again, I probably should have added on there. And then we can go in and start to break it down a little bit farther, right? And say, well, put that part first. Kind of find a nice, maybe find some of those cartilages. Just kind of, right? Remember, we're going to have that alar cartilage pretty much right up in here, back into the cheek, and then that bottom part is a little more kind of in this space. And so we can go in and start to break down the shadow pattern a little bit and find a better separation now between the top and bottom planes of the nose. Right, so we can kind of find our alar cartilage shape. And that's going to link into the wing of the nostril. Pick up a little bit of shadow back along here. Right, kind of sitting right along there. Get the rest of the alar cartilage, or the ball of the nose. Across this way, runs up along here. Right, down to wing of the nostril. Right, kind of sits basically right in that section, and then we have to figure out kind of where the opening of the nasal cavity sits. So in this case, it's going to be down this way. Right, we get kind of the bottom part of the alar cartilage connecting over to right about there. right? Kind of sitting right along there, right? So it's just about like that. And there's a lot more to it than this, right? Like we could keep going and breaking it down farther and farther, but I feel like this is pretty good. And it feels kind of like his nose. And I don't know that we need to take it much farther than this. You know, again, the whole point here is just to figure out how the nose fits on the head in relation to everything else, right? So then we would just keep going, right? Break this bottom third into thirds to find where the mouth is going to sit. You know, and from there I just kind of draw the mouth real quick. You can see how the chin fits in there. I just want you to see how the mouth kind of relates to the nose and fits into that space. But we'll be working on mouths and lips next, and we'll go into those in depth more later. Next up, we're going to go into the 3/4 view and work on a 3/4 view nose starting here. And it starts the same way, right? Starting with the cranial mass, looking for the side plane of the head, and creating the big shape of the head. We always work from big shapes to small shapes. So we're going to start out creating that big shape of the head, just like that, and then find kind of where the back of the jaw sits and where the center line sits. And then just like before, we're going to separate out, a little bit of the ear. Find the hairline and then separate between the hairline and the chin into even thirds, right? And at that point, I'm going to stop, double check, make sure all this stuff works properly. It's a little bit off. Sometimes I guess really well, sometimes things are a little bit off. And then you just go in and adjust your lines a little bit. And as you can see, that I think works a lot better. Separate out the side plane of the head. You know, so we separate the front and side planes, and so we can kind of see a clear side plane there, and then start developing our eye sockets, right? Start with the glabella, the inside of the eye socket, looking for a nice rhythm that can kind of connect the two sides of the brow. And then looking for how the eye socket cuts into the side plane of the head. You know, and then we just kind of close off that shape and make a nice eye socket shape. The nose is going to drop right in here. So we can just use kind of our tools a little bit. The connection point of the nose aligns pretty close to where the center line is. So we know it's going to sit right around here. We can judge the angle of the nose off of the glabella, right? Kind of drops down about this type of an angle. You know, so judging angles is important, right? Remember our measuring tools, we have plumb lines, negative shapes, angles. You know, you have to get really good at judging angles. It's not easy, but right, tip of the nose pops out past this line just a little bit. Wraps around. Kind of back down along the bottom of the alar cartilage. You know, we can use a quick line, kind of find the overall width of the nose and kind of where the back of the nostril is going to be. Again, on some people, the nostril comes out past this line. Some people, it lines up with it. Mostly, we're just looking for the overall width of the nose. And then in this case, her nose kind of lines up right in there, and then we're seeing a little bit of the far nostril out that way. You know, and then based on that, we can kind of figure out a little bit more of this eye socket. Too extreme of an angle. Chin kind of sits right down about here. Right, rounded shape. But let's not worry about that. Let's go in and find this eye socket, and then the rest of the nose, right? So we got to come in here and find, again, kind of, well, we could build that box shape, which I kind of skipped that part a little bit, but it's in here for sure, right? It's kind of sitting like this and like this. You know, we can kind of build that boxy shape in there. You know, sort of like that. And then build our cartilage and shadow shapes around that, right? And so we get her a little bit of shadow along here, drops down a little bit of shadow here, pops up again, right across that tip of the alar cartilage. You know, so knowing those cartilage shapes is going to be really helpful because that's going to help you design these shapes. Drops back around this way. And then we hit the nostril. You know, and then we have to figure out how does the opening of the nasal cavity sit here. Just kind of coming up this way. And I used to have a lot of trouble drawing these little shapes. My recommendation would be to just draw a lot of them. And understand the cartilages, right? Because the cartilages really are what creates these little shapes, like these little like nostril shapes right here. You know, it's the way the cartilage is all locked together, and this is kind of the space that remains between them. Okay, so her nostril up around here, right? That alar cartilage is kind of popping up around this way. Cutting back in a little bit. And this isn't super clear on her, but that alar cartilage is basically doing this. Right, kind of locking on about like that. And connects kind of like right up in here. You know, you can see that shadow kind of pop up this way a little bit. I mean, this part isn't really in shadow, but you can kind of see this part start to go that direction. Anyway, that's it for this one. Let's do one more. So from the side, we're going to start just like we did before with the big shape of the head, starting with the cranial mass, pulling down the front of the head, and then connecting up a nice rhythmical jaw shape that connects rhythmically to the back of the head. Finding the back of the jaw, where the ear is going to sit. And then from there, you can see, make little adjustments as needed. And then from there, we'll go in and find the hairline again, break the face into thirds, take a little measurement, and we might have to make some adjustments, as you can see. And yeah, just take your time with it. Just make sure it's right. And, you know, if you have to spend some time on it, that's fine. So now we're just looking at her from the side. And so we have to remember, like, okay, the forehead drops down. Right? And then the brow kind of protrudes out just a little bit. And then back in this direction. And then that's going to sweep out to the nose, the head, starting with the cranial mass, pulling down the front of the out this way, but hang on, we got to get this right. Technically to the back of the head. Starting right about there. Now, the connection point of her nose has to be just right, and that's going to sit directly under here, right? So if we draw a line straight down from there, the connection point of the nose is going to be roughly right about there. So now we're going to come in here and find the angle of the nose. It's basically sweeping down this direction right across here. Again, being able to judge angles, a very important skill, at least if you're working from reference. Right, we want it to connect right there, right? That's our connection point. The head, starting with the cranial mass, pulling down the front of the head, out this way, but hang on, we gotta just piece it together. And it should fit right in that space, hopefully. Right, now the back of the nostril sits just under kind of like where the eye would be. Like about here, right? So her nostril is going to come all the way back here. The nose is going to be roughly right about there. Socket. So now we're going to come in here and find, sit right about like that, you know, and then it's important to understand how does this connect now down to this area. And it kind of drops back this way a little bit. And then we get the two-cylinder kind of out this direction, right? And then down to the chin. Back around this way. There, right, that's our connection point. The head, starting with the cranial mass, you know, and then same thing as before. We break this bottom third into thirds. And that's going to show us kind of where the lip and the chin are going to sit. The back of the nostril sits just under kind of like where the eye would be. Like about here, right? So her nostril is going to come all the way back here, right? Lip's going to drop right down into here. I come in here and find, sit right about like that. This isn't a lip video, so don't feel like you have to learn this right now. To this, back to the nose. Okay, so remember our cartilages, again, from the side, right? We basically have our alar cartilage here, our nostril, kind of running back up across here. And so now we have to figure out partly where the shadow separation is, right? Because that helps separate the top and the bottom plane of the nose, at least from this angle. Right, so in that case, it's going to basically sit across here, back across this way. And then kind of across the nostril back here, down into here. I come in here and find, sit right about like that. This isn't a lip video, so don't feel like you have to learn this right now. Into this area. Find just a subtle opening right in there. Should be a little bit taller. Our cartilage here, our nostril, kind of running back up across here. And so now we have, so it's right about there. Right, adjust our shadows, right, because I changed them a little bit. Right, this needs to kind of wrap back into this for that alar section. And then right across that little plane along the nostril and then back up. You know, and again, you can see the alar cartilage on her. I mean, it's not like totally hidden. You know, it's up around this way a little bit. Kind of cutting back across here. And kind of back down this way. Subtle opening right in there. Should be a little bit taller. You know, if we want to get really technical, right? So that's kind of like our alar cartilage. and then the wing of the nostril back around here. And you can see that on her, right? There's some like dark halftones up in this area kind of defining this stuff. But is it totally necessary right now? I don't know. I mean, it's good to know that it's there. Action. And then right across that little plane along the nostril. I'll get a better shape on here a little bit. You know, and again, you can see the alar cartilage on her. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then we have the little cast shadow off the bottom here. This way a little bit. We're just going to throw a few more details in here, starting with the hairline. I always find it easier to understand the nose in relation to the rest of the head. So I just kind of wanted to get a few more of the pieces in here, and so you can kind of see how everything should line up. You know, and it's always been helpful. Got, you know, rhythm for the cheek, rhythm for the temple, adding a little bit of the neck, and a little bit of neck muscle, just sternocleidomastoid, and a little bit of collar. Yeah, hopefully this makes sense and it helps, and you can kind of see exactly what we want to be doing with all that nose anatomy that we talked about in the last video, and kind of how it applies not just to the nose, but how the nose relates to the rest of the head is always important. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Bye.